Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to next, Wasteless World Talks. And today we will speak with Kevin and Bill about the conditions, because conditions are omnipresent and it looks like they are here for a purpose. So I will start with you, Kevin, today. If you hear the term conditions, what came first to your mind?
What came first to my mind was the terms and conditions, rather than physical conditions, but the fact that there are always conditions applied to what seems too good to be true, probably is, because of terms and conditions. And it reminded me of this great song by The Clash, Know Your Rights. And they say you have the right to free speech as long as you're not dumb enough to actually try it, which I think is really nice. So that's what I think of when I think of conditions. It's all the hidden problems behind an author.
What about you, Bill?
And don't we have conditions in everything that we do? This talk today is with the conditions that we treat each other politely, or at least like grown-ups with respect. But there's conditions to everything. But then there's the word unconditionally. And I'm not sure what unconditionally means.
Where I came to this word, the first what I saw has been the small letter written conditions on almost every contract or everything which you should sign. So it's written with such a small letters that you cannot read it without, at least we cannot read it without any really strong magnifying glass probably. But on the other hand, many people take the conditions as an excuse. They are bad conditions. I cannot do anything about it. And what is strange, that almost every time, if there is bad condition for someone, for many usually, few make it to their own profit. It's not different. It's all the time this way. That's interesting.
So everything is, when we talk about things such as technology disruption and so on, even when we talk about things like COVID, we've often said there are bad things about that, and there are also good things about that. So the conditions, I think some people are just conditioned to always look for ways to profit from the ambiguity or from the condition that other people are suffering with. And usually to the detriment of other people, usually to their own profit and others' detriment. And in fact, you even named that, Michael, a few weeks ago with the word noject, which is a project, but it's not. It's covered with camouflage for a scheme to make them more money while looking good.
Right.
So how is that related to conditions? Some people just look for the conditions and profit by them.
Just before we started, you mentioned the weather forecast, which, let's say, it's hard to trust these days. And I realized a few years ago, then when there should be some big strike in my country or so, that the few days before, every time, was the predicted very bad weather. No matter whether it was summer, whether it was winter, it was, this weekend will be so horrible, so big wind, don't leave your homes. There was all the time a lot of people there. But I'm sure that some people did not went there because of the weather forecast. Because the conditions should be so bad, so nobody will come there. It was quite interesting. I realized it a few years ago. So I'm not sure. Maybe these are as well somehow the ordered conditions. So I think that the ordered conditions, someone say, do something that the people do not come together. You know, right now is running the 78th United Nations Assembly in New York. I just ask the people there, but there is nobody in boiler suit visible during the event.
You did that.
Hmm?
You said that. I thought that was fascinating, very very insightful.
Because these people will be there just after the cameras are switched off. They will clean up the mess the people without boiler suit left behind. And this is the issue, I think. This is the conditions which we are creating artificially to keep someone on the top because the others are pushed to the bottom. Kevin, sorry, I spoke for too long time.
No, that's okay. I was just thinking of another kind of condition, but I wasn't quite sure what it meant. Have you heard of this expression, the human condition?
Mm.
Yes.
It's a biological explanation of us as a species and where we are and what makes us tick. And I think that's extremely interesting.
In fact, there was just a few articles in the news within the last couple of days about has the human species peaked? Did you see something about that? It makes me think that people take any they take it to the worst possible conclusion. So in our country now we're fighting over the budget and people are talking about a governmental shutdown like it's the end of the world. When in fact I suspect that if the government can't function, we'd all be better off. And we're having strikes. The auto workers are striking, and the news people are talking about how awful that's going to be for the economy, how bad that's going to be. And I hear very few voices saying this is going to be good. This might turn out very, very well. It's as if everybody's programmed to take it to the worst possible conclusion.
You know, there are many people who say it cannot work without government. Government is condition for democracy. Government must be there. These are sentences I hear for 10 years. You know my approach to the government. So I think they are obsolete already for a long time because they do not function as they should, same as the United Nations. So I think you are right. It will be at least significantly will be reduced the national debt and or the expenses. And if the people can work together, and that's another condition, of course, then it will work. But the question, can people work together? What I say, they can work together better than nations. That's my opinion.
I don't know if it's been in the news where you guys are, but in the UK, there was a big news article this morning that carbon offsetting doesn't work.
And there will be a conference in 1 month in Germany, carbon offsetting conference. The other one was 2 months ago in New York.
Yeah, and if you think about the human condition, I mean, it is depressingly stupid. It really is. I mean, the rest of us know it can't possibly work, but they still go on with it. They still use it as some kind of excuse to not change their behavior. And I mean, it is so transparently ridiculous that why do they even bother trying to trick us anymore?
it's easy because they get money, they get funded. There was a last year winner of the Earthshot Prize. One of the company called, I think, 41 or 44, I do not remember the name exactly. And they take the carbon and put it in the soil, somehow mineralization or whatever. They get them 1 million pound. And yesterday, just someone promoted someone who is generally in the commission who select the right candidates. And I asked him just one question. Can you or the company say how much carbon they already stored in this way? No, they cannot. And nobody asked them, they just promise and they will get another million. As you said, so I don't understand this short-sighted stupidity. Maybe it is a way how to launder your dirty money. It looks like that. It's the same like a carbon emission trading. So
it could be something very logical, because I think that most of the people on the planet Earth do not have the bandwidth or the time or the ability to think these things through. And yet they see these problems and they don't have an answer. So the giants are giving them an answer. And many of them will believe it simply because they need some sort of answer. And when they say, uh, carbon trading or whatever, it sounds like they are in touch with everything they know, when in fact they're just parroting back something that they don't understand. And also a lot of people will accept it because it matches with what one of the tribes is saying, right? Um, it matches with what Trump is saying. Or so how many people are left who actually have the ability to think critically and uh, to compare what's being said with their own observations? I think there's very few people on this earth who can do that. And I was very heartened by a couple of things lately. The EU is requiring, has passed laws. I think if I've got this right, guys, correct me if not. About you cannot say that this is a climate friendly or eco friendly or planet safe or anything unless you can prove it, and that there have been fines levied. And America is considering similar bills, and things like AI now having to have a signature on it so that you know that it's AI. So this transparency that that some governments are trying to enforce is a good thing, and it helps all of us who do not have enough bandwidth to consider all of these very, very deep issues.
I think there is one topic why the people believe that carbon trading is working or the other stuff. It is the amount of money which is all the time connected to this information. $100 million has been invested by government, 2 billion, whatever. So big amounts. So the ordinary people will say, okay, if the government trusts it, I will trust it. The issue which I have with this new legislation against the, let's say, greenwashing or green cheating, or it doesn't matter how we call it, is that it is implemented by people who do that in a much stronger volume or bigger volume than the others. The others just follow. Carbon emission trading was introduced by United Nations. 1992, legalized 1997. Since 1997, the carbon emissions are only growing year by year because, sorry, I paid my indulgences. I can do what I want. And that's exactly. I just wonder, I saw very short footage from the United Nations Assembly. I just wonder why the walls are not lined with logos, Shell and Conoco, because it will be exactly. And I saw a few years ago, I saw some proposal, I don't know who made it, that the politicians should wear generally the logos, like the men who do the sports, whom they represent. It will be fine. So that will be transparent. But what they are trying to implement, if the first one who breach it will not be penalized, it has no sense. It's just another greenwashing. And this is what I feel.
What I think would be really interesting would be to take what's coming out of COP, what's coming out of the United Nations, all of these, and gather just a year's rules, look at them and say, okay, who is benefiting here? Which ones are made for the giants? Which ones are made for the little man? And one thing I don't buy is that if it's good for the giants, it's good for all of us. If it's good for industry, it's good for society. It doesn't work that way. It would be just so interesting to see how many rules made by man benefits man and how many benefits the giants.
And it will be very easy. We have the AI, we have ChatGPT, just ask. Today, it's really easy. I cannot do it, I cannot work, or I do not want, and I did not learn. But I'm sure it will be an easy task. But the result will be completely boosting everything what they say away. Antonio Guterres, the head of United Nations, he speaks against crude fuel before he sat in his private jet and fly to a next destination. And he do it every day, Why the people, 98 countries, which are generally 98 private jets, should come to New York when we have a Zoom? No. What's the reason? So there are so many. But until we really, it must be a radical step.
I think if you look at the statistics of the number of private jets being built and being flown, the number isn't going down. And these things are a real menace. So it is one rule for all of us who have cars, who have to be punished with this and that and this and that. But for the rich and their private jets, no problems at all. They can do whatever they want.
And that's the point. The fact is, if there will not be the workers, there will be no private jets. And this the workers must understood. And I don't think a worker is a stupid man or woman, not at all. These people are frequently with a logic thinking, and I work in a factory in Panasonic long time ago. And I met people from all over the Europe there, and they work on a production line, And we sat on a lunch, and I start to speak with them, and he said, I don't speak Czech. Can you English? So we started in English, and I realized that he's a really high-ranked chirurg from Romania who just simply did not find any other work. So a man who has much higher education and skills probably than anyone in the factory, including the general manager, was working on a production line.
We were talking about my wife and I were talking about intelligence last night, the different forms of intelligence. And to go along with what you're saying, Michael, we started talking about street smart. We call it street smarts. And just what does that mean? And how is that different from intelligence? And how is that different from the other ways that we define? But just what you were saying is oftentimes the person who is has to be careful with their money to be able to have enough to pay the rent, who comes to work every day even when they don't feel like it, who does all of these, obeys all of these rules of society's rules, are often the ones who can see beyond the facade, can see beyond the the greenwashing, can see beyond what the giants say, the words that come out of their mouth. Oftentimes they're the first ones to be able to see it, and oftentimes I think just my suspicion that the people who have come from a privileged background often cannot see it as well because they are part of the privilege, and it doesn't help for them. They're not invested in being able to see behind the curtain, to see the man who's pulling the strings behind the curtain. So that's one of the reasons that I'm attracted to this wasteless world concept, because it takes away some of the masks that the giants wear. It increases the visibility, and so anyhow, so the conditions. Getting back to the conditions, I thought this was a very simple word. When you said conditions, I said, "Really? We're going to spend an hour talking about conditions?" But in fact, like every time, every other word that you've come up with, um, there are many layers, many layers. Good topic. Thank you.
It's actually interesting to think about in English, if we're not able to do something, we can say, I don't feel like doing it, I don't want to do it, I'm ill. Whereas if you translate from Danish, you say, I'm in no condition to do it, which is actually a really nice use of the word.
We have both generally. We have both expressions, so we can use both. And I just asked yesterday, it's again one of the conditions. In Czech, we have one saying of many, which says, the thief call first, catch the thief. And I asked the others, of course, in a poll, whether they have the same. And some answers that it should be the same. Who live in a glass house shouldn't throw the stones, but I don't think it's the same generally. It's quite interesting, but the others ask, what does it mean? You know, and I was not just on a computer. I was not in a condition generally, because I feel very bad last 3 days, and plus some other issues. And I was not able to answer, but I will answer tomorrow probably. But it was quite interesting, you know, and I think that as everything what was, or majority of the things, let's say, introduced or taken over by human, like the time and time measuring, it's something good become the tool of evil or of a giant generally. You know, recycling, great idea, just in the wrong hands. That's the issue.
Actually, one interesting thing about conditions is that I'm pretty sure if you ask the generation before us what they thought about conditions, what it meant to them, they would say working conditions. And I think as it isn't the top of mind issue for us these days, because unions have done so much over the last 30, 40, 50 years to improve workers' conditions for everybody, that it just, certainly in Europe, it isn't the issue that it once was.
Just one question before I let you speak, Bill. Have any of you been member of a unions in your life? Work unions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have not, but I have worked on the assembly line.
I worked as a worker for some time, and I was never. Many people asked me to do so, but I rejected every time. I see no benefits So this is why I'm asking. Okay, that was just a short interruption. Sorry, Bill.
How do you know I'm getting ready to say something? Oh, I lean forward. You see the eyes. So you said the thief is the first one to cry, catch the thief, which is very interesting because do you know the word narcissist?
Mm-hmm.
A narcissist um, is a fascinating subject for me. And one of the things that a narcissist will do is accuse others what they know themselves they do, right? Um, and we have some politicians over here who are great at doing that, right? I'm sure you've seen them your own. Um, so that's sort of what the thief being the first one to say, catch the thief. The narcissist is the first one to say, you've been cheating, you're unworthy, uh, because they know themselves that they themselves are guilty of that. So when we talk about conditions, it's not it's more than just the conditions of this subject. It's the conditions that I think about this subject. See, the conditions in my own brain that has trained me to ignore this or to pay attention to that or to assign blame for this or that. And so it could be a very innocuous statement, but two different people are going to see different conditions surrounding that statement.
I think what is very interesting, as you mentioned before, that the people who has born rich generally and stay rich all their time, that they did not see the conditions of the poor people. They cannot imagine. They speak about it all the time, but they cannot imagine what does it mean be hungry. For them, being hungry is just they did not get 5 times a day, only 4 times a day something to eat. But this is why I think even the Communist Manifest, and we touched it before, I think this is one of the reasons why it did not work. As I told you, before I started my work, so 10 years ago generally, I wrote a statement. It's called IBCSD lab statement. And I wrote it and I read it. It was in English. I read it and I start to laugh. And at the time I worked from home. And my wife asked me, are you crazy? Why are you laughing? And I said, I wrote the next Communist Manifest. You know, I have to learn it in a school because I spent 18 years in a communist country. So I have to learn it. And you know what I did? I really feel like the Communist Manifest. And I read the original again and again and again. And then I realized there is one difference. And the difference was that Marx and Engels, they said everything should be shared between all people. But they forgot to write that to share something, you have to produce it first. This was not interesting because they never work in a production line. They visited a factory only as a speaker. They never work there. They think that the bread in the shop, that it will fly in the shop and you will find it there. And I have there a sentence, I think, or more, which says, okay, if we do it, we have to do together first, then we can share it. And this is the profit sharing principle. But without it, we cannot. How do I know that how much carbon has been captured? Not a single of the companies. I ask many of those, prove to me how much you would like to have a $1 billion US project. Give me the proof that you can catch it and tell me how much you did. Not a single one came back to me again, you know, because they don't know. And all projects until now failed, as I know, no matter how big the investment was.
The whole thing is a distraction. You can say we're going to capture carbon, but that is not the solution. The solution is not to generate it.
Just yesterday, there was someone writing, or day before yesterday, that there is a new paint for houses which catch the CO2. that it works same as trees. So my first question, of course, that's great. How much oxygen it produces? And the answer was, it does not produce any oxygen. It captures carbon, which everything captures carbon, what is around us, everything. It must not be a new pain. I will show you something. Yesterday, I have a meeting with a very special material. I don't know whether you can see me through, probably a little. It's material. It's a plastic. And generally, if you put this on your roof, it will reduce the solar heat by 60%. And it's semi-transparent, so you cannot see completely through, but the light, it reduced the light income only by 10%. It's something which is existing. It was invented here not so long time ago, so it's quite a new material. And it was quite interesting to speak with the guy and to see. And I said, and should we make a test? He said, okay. So I took my heat gun and we tried with a heat gun, and it really worked different. Then I trust this solution. But if I will be a billionaire, I will never put a single penny in a project when someone will come without any result, just with a promise. The condition will be proof what you say. I wrote about it an article about, it's a few years ago where was that sell your story. And I said, no, sell your result. And this is one article, because then I will believe. Without it, I do not. And if I think about back to the politics generally, what will be the condition should be the condition for people who will really lead? Who will act as politicians, not as the current one, who will really lead the nations. For sure, it will not be education. For sure, it will not be amount of money which they have. It will be very, very different. But it will be understandable to everyone how these people get there. I mentioned before, the reason why the politicians do not really deliver what they promise is that they are not leaders. Because if there will be leaders, they do not need to be voted or elected. But they need election to get there. Leaders don't need it. Leaders are being followed.
And I don't want to sound too cynical, but I don't think there are many politicians who haven't been bought, who aren't in somebody's pocket. And it's not the ordinary man's pocket. It's in the pocket of the giants. That's how politics works.
That's not cynical, Kevin. That's how politics works. And people who think differently, I think not very many of them get into politics because it has such a bad reputation. And people do not like or trust politicians. So why would you be attracted to go in that direction? So it's only people who are attracted by the way that politics works and the people and companies who lobby and buy them off. I don't see that as being cynical at all. So with all these conditions that we've been talking about, I think the way ahead is what we're doing now is trying to say, how often do you have a conversation like this? I very rarely have a conversation like this. There are just not that many people talking about it. And when people do talk about politics, they're either stirring up a fight or they're being defensive, or it's not an exchange of ideas.
I will have tomorrow in my Czech talks, you are the first who will know who it will be. I will have a meeting with a candidate for Czech president. He was here in 2017. So he was in my office already at the time. He did not reach it. It doesn't matter. He is a very wealthy man in my country. So he is a music producer and so on. And I really like him because he came and he was human. He behaved very standard way. I will never say he has so much money or influence or anything like that. And he accepted my invitation and will be here. It will be only in Czech, but will be here in the show tomorrow. And I'm really looking forward to meet him again virtually after generally 5 or 6 years. It will be quite nice.
Good for you.
And I will ask him these questions or similar. It's about nothing. So we will not go into the politics especially or so. But I think it will be an interesting discussion. And just for you to let you know, 3 minutes left.
Wow.
Your microphone, Kevin.
One more condition, and that's the condition of the planet. And without people and organizations like the Wasteless World, the condition won't get better.
It must be the understanding. What I think should change first. The condition should not be written in a small letters. It should be the biggest letters all the time, which are on any document. Not the very opposite. In my country, they make the statement, and if something like that is written somewhere, it should be in a font of whatever, 12 or whatever. You know what? They put it in a TV shots where the 8 or 12, it's almost invisible, and you cannot even take a magnifying glass for your TV. It does not work.
And not only is the font small, but the print is not black, it's gray.
Frequently, yeah. And this is the sign why not to sign it. But it's on every document. So we will stop probably using our handwriting skills will decrease because at the moment, for majority of the people, only a signature is the only thing which we are writing by hand. All the rest we are typing. I don't know how it is with you.
And I'm signing my name electronically on this thing. I think the written language is escaping. I don't know if my grandchildren will even know how to read or write. They don't know how to write cursive, and which we use that. We write notes to each other in cursive, and they can't read them. But at some point, not too distant future, we will not be handwriting anything.
I don't know because they slightly change. Yeah, they slightly change the timing. So I don't know when exactly it will end. So I will say thanks to both of you. It was once again very interesting discussion. Let me wish everyone have a nice time, free of waste and wasting in all its forms. Stay safe, free, and request the